Uh, Hello, everyone. Welcome to the How Good Innovation Series. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you've been here before, if this is your first one, we're so excited to have you. This has been a really great example of pre-competitive collaboration in the food space, started during the pandemic and has continued to be a community of stakeholders from across the food system who are coming together to try to advance regeneration. So yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm really looking forward to our next hour of discussion. As a way of introducing one another, if our audience members would like to put their name and where they're based, if you'd like, you can put your role or the company that you work for into the chat. We can get to know each other that way a little bit. My name is Leah Wolf. I'm currently in Brooklyn, New York, formerly a whole animal butcher. I worked here in Brooklyn, New York at a whole animal butcher shop called The Meat Hook for about 5 years, and then went on to get my master's degree in food systems and sustainability, which then led me here as my role head of regenerative education and content here at How Good. So that's a little bit about my credentials. And today we're going to be talking with Mike Loftus, who is the meat director for Sprouts Farmers Market, and Paul Greive, who is the co-founder and VP of Sales and Marketing for Pasturebird. We're going to discuss the mutual benefits, both financial and otherwise, of innovation, regeneration, and transparency for brands and retailers working together. And just a little bit of what to expect from our discussion today. We'll wrap up our quick introduction. We'll have our conversation with our thought leaders. That'll last about 45 to 50 minutes. And then throughout there, as we continue our discussion, I'd like to invite the audience to put any questions that they might have for the speakers into the chat. I will do my best to get to them and relay them to our panel. But we found that that's the best way to kind of keep the conversation flowing and not have to go into breakout rooms, which, you know, I think we all like to avoid if we can. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Mike and Paul to introduce themselves. Just a brief 1 to 2 minute little introduction about yourself, about your role, and maybe a little bit about your journey into sustainability and regenerative food. Paul, do you wanna kick us off?
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike's been at this a lot longer than me, so let me go first because he's got a lot longer track record here. Just about 10 years ago now, I was getting out of the military where I contracted Lyme disease and got a lot of health issues, and I got into kind of healthy food and eating well through that. Got some chickens for the backyard, never really planned on it being a business, but a hobby became, you know, a backyard business, became a real thing. And we got really excited about this idea of regenerative agriculture. For my whole life growing up in Seattle, all I heard was that, you know, the best thing you can do for the planet would just be to eat less meat. And that's just what I operated on. But when I learned that actually animals can play a really important role in ecosystem function, if they're raised the right way, I got really excited about this idea. And so kind of 50 birds became 500, became 5,000. And we've been on this journey to really make nutrient dense food and pasture raised meat more accessible. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about that.
Thanks so much. And you're joining us. I think you may win the How Good Innovation Series most engaging background award thus far. Great. Mike, do you wanna tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my background's not near as cool as Paul's. I can't turn around and yell at chickens in mine. Look at it. Yeah, I've been in the meat business forever. You'd probably be called a dinosaur by a lot of the younger people. And I've actually seen a couple people log on that are probably around my age doing this kind of stuff. Yeah, I started out working in packing houses when I was going to college to do that to pay for college, and got up in to where I was looking at it and found out I couldn't make more money doing what I went to school for than I could make cutting meat. So I went to work in retail stores cutting meat, worked my way up, you know, like thing, went to a meat cutter, a meat manager, those types of things. And I finally moved backstage. My first backstage job was with just an 11 store division of the old American stores in New Mexico. Did that, and I worked through there. I worked for American Stores, Raley's, Safeway, Albertsons, and now Sprouts. And I'm really happy to be working for Sprouts. I've looked at Sprouts and admired Sprouts for many years, what they do and the way they do go to market and the products and things they carry. I worked in traditional retailers for a long time, doing procurement, doing merchandising, marketing, operations, all those types of things. And I enjoyed it. It was a great job, but I did not like the way traditional marketers went to market, just giving things away, raising prices on other stuff to do things. And I thought there had to be a better way to be a retailer. And I got the opportunity to come to Sprouts, and there is a better way to be a retailer, trying to sell products that customers want, the attributes that they're looking for, and trying to sell healthier products to people to just make a better world. And also, I spend a lot of time out in the market. My job is director of product development in meat and seafood. So most of my job, half my time is spent out in the field, visiting farms, visiting plants, visiting our producers and growers and all that thing to make sure, number one, we're getting what we want and they're doing what they say they're doing. And it's really opened my eyes to some different things. And when I was able to visit Paul and Kenny down in Georgia at the farm there, it was a super eye-opening and a very exciting thing to me that I'd never seen anything like this before. And I thought, this is so cool. We've got to have this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm going to take it back over to you. Could you just tell us a little bit about how Pasturebird is different from other brands, and maybe just give us a crash course, Pasturebird 101 for the 70 odd people are on the call, some of whom may be familiar with Pasturebird and others who might not?
Yeah, I like to keep it super simple. So what makes Pasturebird different is that the chickens move. I'll say a lot of things here that are not meant to be a knock against conventional or traditional production at all, but it is how we're different. So the way that the modern industry kind of works is with, large stationary houses with varying degrees of outdoor access, or, non-GMO feed or organic feed, sometimes some different breeds. And those are kind of those that we have to pull for the last 50, 60 years in the chicken industry here in the US and really beyond. What we got really excited about is going back. And so this is an innovation, and I think it's the future of food, but it's also the past, where animals never were stationary, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. They were always grazing ground, pooping on the ground and then moving to the next spot. And so what makes Pasturebird really different is, we figured out how to scale that up. There's probably 900 to 1,000 small farmers doing pasture-raised poultry throughout the US in what we call mobile coops. So the birds are kind of living on the ground 24/7, where they can forage for bugs and worms and grasses and seeds. And that's all great. But when it's done at such a small scale, it's really hard to put that product out to the market at a price people can stomach. So what we did is we figured out how to automate that, scale it up, and to do it at a, hopefully at a scale that works for consumers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Mike, I'm going to kind of throw the same question to you, but how is Sprouts different from other retailers?
Well, I think I touched on it a little bit in my introduction. We focus on a healthier customer. We're not looking to sell groceries to everybody. We're looking at two segments of the population. We're looking at health enthusiasts and adventure seekers for our stores. That's what, there's a lot of grocery shoppers out there, and everybody tries to go after the same person. We don't want everybody. We don't want that person just to come in and just going to shop ads and leave your store without doing anything. We want somebody that's come in, believes in what we're selling and what we want to do. You walk into our stores, it says Sprouts Farmers Market on the front, and our stores are generally 25 to about 30,000 square feet compared to a 60 to 150,000 traditional retailer. You walk in there, the shelves are low, you can see the whole store. The center is dominated by produce. Our produce is our calling card, and we do a great job with produce. Do a lot of local sourcing throughout the United States where we're at. We are in 22 states throughout the United States, 380 stores, and we're, if not the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing retailers in the US. We're at 380 stores now, and our CEO has challenged us. He wants to be at 500, 700 stores within the next 4 to 5 years. So you will hopefully see a lot of Sprouts in more areas and a lot more Sprouts, so it's easier to shop us.
Wow, ambitious. I love that. So from your perspective, Paul, what was your experience like working with Sprouts versus other retailers?
To me, a big problem with regenerative is that as long as you can spell the word, you can sort of put it on package right now. It's really under regulated. It's very hard to not see it kind of go in the way of greenwashing. And the most important thing to me is, long before we even talked about selling the sprouts, Mike actually came out personally for a farm tour. And it wasn't the kind of like, you know, fireworks kind of, hey, come out and just see things. It was really like he came out and he asked some pretty hard questions. He wanted to really see how things worked from the ground up. That's always the most important thing to me in this regenerative movement, because it's so easy to just greenwash your product and slap regenerative on anything. The biggest thing to me was Mike we weren't even talking about working together, you know, on the business side yet. He genuinely was kind of interested in seeing how the operation worked, understanding how it's different. And, you know, not just doing that through Zoom or through pictures. He actually came out, and this was honestly, it was during COVID, and it was during some kind of tricky times to travel. So he really did make an effort to come out and see it for himself. And that's huge to me.
Yeah, and that leads me to another question for you, Mike, which is how do you personally, but also Sprouts at large, kind of foster that engagement between executive teams and the farms and ensure that that corporate decision making is meaningfully embedded within the supply system?
Yeah, I think we're lucky because our executive team believes that we need to lead in these areas, not follow. We should be the ones that are going out and finding things like this and doing the right things for the environment, for the animals, for our customers. And that, you know, our CEO, Jack Sinclair, he came from Europe. He was with Tesco and some of the other retailers over there. So he has a little different mindset than your traditional American CEO. He looks at some of the things and says, I can't believe you're doing some of the stuff you're doing. Why aren't we doing this already? and I have to come back and say, well, Jack, I'd love to be doing that, but, you know, it's going to raise our cost X to do that. And he goes, okay, we'll find a way to do it. And same thing with my other bosses. You know, they really believe in these types of things. And we find something like this, it's unique and it really fits into our values and what we're trying to do. It's something I think that we really get behind and do something about. I know, real honestly, it's going to be a slower build than what we would honestly like. And I think what Paul would really like, but I think it's something we can easily get behind and make it successful.
And so I think you've both touched on this a little bit from both the retailer and the brand side, but it seems like the one common thread is trying to find the balance between sort of overarching sustainability goals and, you know, what are ultimately pretty strict pricing requirements. Mm-hmm. And so when you're kind of navigating that, how have the two of you kind of worked together, or how do you have any advice for people who are trying to kind of navigate those difficult waters? Paul, if you want to start, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the things that I've talked about a lot for like the past 6 years in the pastured poultry movement specifically was the need for producers to figure out how to meet consumers in the middle somewhere. You know, I wrote this morning about how I came up very much square in the middle class, and we were a sports family, and my folks just weren't the type that were going to get to a farmer's market and be able to kind of go way out of their way to bring in really nutrient dense products. And I don't think they could have afforded sort of what we were doing back in the day. And as cool as pasture poultry is, and it's nutrient dense, regenerative, and it's all these things, like if it's not, you know, accessible, which means affordable and convenient enough to go get it, it's just not going to get widespread adoption. We're like huge believers that, you know, this regenerative movement needed to happen 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Like, we're way behind the 8 ball already. And we need to put these kind of products into people's fridges and into their houses and onto their backs, you know, food and fiber. But we really felt like we needed to figure out how to bring some scale to this. And one of the most important partnerships that I think we did, is we did a partnership with Purdue Farms back in 2019. That gave us a lot of the leverage and the scale with the, you know, the hatchery and the transportation and the harvesting and the packaging and kind of the capital to be able to bring down our costs in a way that we're still not going to be the cheapest on the shelf by far, but I think you'll see working with Mike and with his team to a price point where I think people are going to be able to make the jump for it. It's not, the $40 whole chicken like it used to be, which was really, really tough for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to dig a little bit further into that, how do you respond to other farmers and other producers who kind of doubt that business case for making a switch to more regenerative farming or animal husbandry?
Well, I just think that there's two ways to change the world. There's one that's kind of from the ground up, and that's all your really small, independent local farms. And I think that's beautiful and it's amazing. And yeah, we are going to change the world with 1 million small farms. But if I'm going to see kind of the landscape look different for my kids in the next generation, I think we need any and all hands on deck. And so when an awesome company like Purdue, who's huge, when they want to do things authentically and they want to do things kind of differently and they want to pioneer this path, it's really important that those of us in the regenerative space kind of come alongside those brands and jump in and help out there too, because it's just as important, if not more important, than the little tiny mom and pop farm that sells at the farmer's market. I'm not saying they're not important, they're super important. And I think the Purdue's of the world kind of blazing this new trail is really cool and really important too. So I think that they're both really key.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, do you have anything to add as far as how Sprouts kind of goes about balancing out the quality and the cost?
Yeah, I'm glad I wanted to touch on that a little bit. As we got together with these guys, and exactly what Paul said, Purdue is one of our NAE chicken suppliers that we carry. They do all of our stores on the east. And if it wasn't for Purdue, I probably would not have met Paul and Kenny and his farm down in Georgia on this. They brought us down there to look at it, and talk about it for their animal welfare summit last year and look at different things about what was going on in the industry. So it gives number one, the opportunity for these guys to connect with retailers like myself, having that reach and that scope on that. But also, we have warehouses from Northern California to Florida. We have to get product to those warehouses. It has to be consistent product, and it has to be priced consistently. So when a customer goes into one of our stores, no matter where it's at, they can find the same types of things priced very similarly on that. It's really tough for us to try and buy from 9 different poultry suppliers for 9 different areas on that, because it's just, number one, it's a lot of work. We don't have enough people to do it. So being able to partner with folks like that, make it much more achievable. And we're doing the same thing, real honestly, in our beef section on our grass-fed beef. They're part of a larger organization, but they're a smaller part of it, like Pasturebird is, and they're very committed to the product they carry too. So there's a lot of that going on out there. And I'm with Paul. I love the smaller ranchers and farmers, and I hear from them all the time saying, hey, we have a great product. We'd love to get into your store. And I'd love to be able to put every one of those in our store, but we have basically 20 feet of fresh meat case in our store with limited amount of SKUs we can put in there. And what goes in there has to meet the demands not only of our customers, but of our company, of what the return we need to get out of that product. So, if I could put in every one of them, I could, but something like this makes it so much easier to scale and to be able to get it where it needs to be and have that product consistent and everywhere we need it to go.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna direct this next question at Paul, but I think that it will also apply to you, Mike. So I'll follow up with you afterward. But before, I think that in maybe 5-10 years ago, being sustainable, being natural, being regenerative, and you kind of touched on this, Paul, the kind of dilution of some of those terms, but that could really put you ahead of the pack in terms of sales and consumer loyalty. But now it's kind of becoming table stakes. And the system that so many sustainable brands were built to disrupt is actually adapting. And these bigger brands are making claims, whether or not they are greenwashing or verifiable, depends on who it is. But how do you keep your competitive edge in that kind of a market?
Mike will have more fun answering this one. I mean, we're founded on a super simple us that our birds just move to fresh pasture each and every day. I mean, it's a very black and white, yes or no, pass or fail kind of grade that we get. We're either raising the birds on pasture or we're not. That happens to have a regenerative impact on the land. That's great. What I wanted to say is, I actually think it's great that sustainable is kind of table stakes now, and now we're really elevating and look at regenerative. That's just the kind of evolution of food. And how awesome is it that a big company like Purdue is seeing the consumer demand for regenerative food and to start putting up some of those type of products too. I mean, that's truly us seeing the needle move in our lifetime. And that's consumers, but it's also retailers like Mike and like Sprouts, who's been in this game for a long time, who have offered, sustainable food, and now they're starting to offer regenerative food. And it's like, that's really encouraging to me. I mean, I think that that's proof that the needle is moving. And sure, we can be super pessimistic and say, well, it's a lot of greenwashing and sustainable should have never really been a goal because that's just like treading water. But I would push back on that and say change happens slowly and change happens over time. And it really is consumers asking for regenerative food. And you're going to see retailers and brands start to produce that kind of food. I mean, I get a lot of people saying, hey, factory farming and Purdue and all this. And I always just say, look, I mean, these companies produce what people ask for and produce the largest organic producer in the country because that's what people ask for. And so that's what they produce. And so now with people starting to ask for regenerative and for pasture raised, I think you're going to see more of that. And I think that that's just proof that the needle is moving, and I think that's actually really exciting.
Mike, I'd like to hear from you on kind of the retailer side, but if you have advice for brands or retailers, I think that you have plenty of experience with both.
Yeah, I do looking at that. And one thing I would say about what Paul was talking about, I know, and he wants to stay ahead of the pack and stuff like that. But I also think this is something, that as people see, they can grow from, they can see how, and I won't say easy it's done, but how it can be achieved in doing things. And I think that can help grow that whole side of the agriculture industry instead of everybody just saying, hey, let's go do it the same way we've done for the last 50 years. That, hey, there's something we can do that's similar to what we've done for the last 50 years, but it's probably a better way to do it and possibly could be actually financially less for us on something like that. So I think it's really cool. And you look at us and where we're looking at and trying to stay competitive and what's going on out there. We can't compete with the great big guys on cost and some of the other things they do out there. And very honestly, everybody is now selling organic, natural type items. Not all of it, and it's not their entry price point type items, but it's out there. If somebody wants to go shop organic or natural items, they can go to Walmart and buy it. It's there for them, no doubt. So, we have to continually look for what is the next thing, where things going, what can be new or exciting to continue to give us an edge on that. And I think, Pasturebird is one of those extremely rare things you go out and find and say, wow, this is super cool. And this is something that we can do. A Walmart, Albertsons, Kroger couldn't do this. Although we're in 22 states, 380 stores, we have regions that, are 25, 30 stores where we can roll out a program like this, get it out there and get it started and get it growing, learn from it, see where we need to be, where does it need to be priced? How do we need to display it? What's kind of advertising and marketing needs to be done for these type of items to make them stand out? Well, not hurting the rest of our category. This needs to be something that grows the category, not trades people from organic down to Pasturebird. I'd be happy if it traded in AE up to Pasturebird on that, and we can keep going that because I don't know if we'll see it in my tenure, but I would love to see all of our more traditional NAE chicken be raised in this manner. And I think that's for a retailer like this, I think that's a possibility in the future. So, yeah, and I think as growers out there see what Paul, Kenny, and these guys are doing and how they're achieving it and what can be done along with it. And, the regenerative aspects of what happens, when we were out at the farm, you're walking around, you see where the barn is for all the chickens in, you see them sitting there pecking, doing all the things, eating worms and bugs off the ground. And you look over where that barn was the day before, and that ground is just trampled and it's muddy and kind of, doesn't look too great, but you see there's organic matter there. You see where that barn was 2 days before that, a week before that, a month before that, and you see all this beautiful grass growing there and cattle grazing in it. And if I'm a rancher or a grower, I look at that and say, that looks to me like a pretty decent way to do things. you can do it. I know it's not going to work for everybody, and there's a lot of capital that need to be done, but I think it's a unbelievably interesting way to go.
And as we're kind of talking about the future and moving the needle and what are things going to look like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, as I'm sure you're both aware, and most of the people on this call are aware, the age of the American farmer is increasing with each passing year. So and Paul, my understanding is that you are sort of a farming convert. You didn't come from a farming family, and this is something that you decided was was something you wanted to pursue as an adult. So what do you think, from your perspective, what did regenerative producers need from retailers to not only survive, but thrive, and maybe even entice a newer, younger generation of farmers to get into it?
It's so funny because it's like my friends and my peers, I mean, I see everybody from 85 to kind of 15 coming into regenerative. And so this whole idea that the American farmer is getting older, and I think it's like up to 67 years old now, the average age of a farmer in the US. So many people not wanting to go back kind of to the family farm and the way that things are being done. I mean, we always say we're like so blessed to be first generation farmers because we weren't locked into a certain way of doing things or a preconceived notion on how things are supposed to work. We weren't offending anybody by doing things differently. We were able to just go out and kind of do what we felt like nature was modeling for us, which is moving animals around. But I think as the needle moves towards these more regenerative systems, which are frankly just, Mike talked about it. I mean, it's a beautiful system that harmonizes with nature, and we can kind of geek out on that, but working in conjunction with nature is a lot more fun than working against her. I'll just say that, I think you're going to see a lot more young people, hopefully a lot more talent. Right now, sadly to me, like a lot of the talent has gone into the plant-based and the cell-based meat game. It's fine. I have nothing wrong with that. I don't have anything against that game, but we really need like the best and brightest to think about how we can produce animals in a way that's good for the planet too. It's just a huge challenge that I think we face. And so you talked about sustainability. That's really this idea that we're going to like minimize the bad things. We're going to do as few bad things as possible. And the exciting flip of the script to me is with regenerative. It's like, no, we're not just trying to minimize the bad. We're trying to maximize the good. And that's a lot more exciting mission to get behind than like just trying to do as little harm as possible. And so I think you're going to see a lot of talent and a lot of more kind of youth. I always talk about, female and veteran talent coming into agriculture, which is like really important to me. I think you're going to see a lot more of that with the regenerative movement as well, which is a huge plus in my book.
Certainly. Mike, you've worked with suppliers and producers from all over the country for a long time now. What are your thoughts on this? What do farmers need from retailers, like Sprouts, but also more traditional retailers to kind of spur on this younger generation?
Yeah, and that one's a tough one for me since I'm really not out there in the field, but I grew up in a rural farming ranching community in eastern New Mexico, when I was a kid, and half of our school back then was FFA. Things I wasn't doing it, but I go out and help my friends on ranches and stuff like that, and that's where I started working in packing houses. Was there because that's the best paying job in the area at that point in time. I think you look at it at this point in time, I think everybody's looking at, okay, what's the best return on my investment? If I'm going to school, how am I going to make money, or what am I going to do to make money? I think one of the things that could be really important as we look into where, what the government's doing and in the cost of college and everything. Cost of college isn't right for everybody, no matter what everyone thinks, with the cost and the return and everything on it. I think there's a really opportunity for us to do some more of the trade type things and get people trained and get more people in FFA and 4-H and things like that, and start understanding a little bit more about animals. And the other one I look at, as I travel around visiting farms, and I think especially a little bit more probably in chicken, but as I visit plants and stuff, there's a huge immigration population out there that works in the agricultural industry. And we have those people, and those people, they're the lower tier of income. If those people can start getting into not only the working in the plants, but owning their own farms or doing some farming stuff like this, a lot of those people grew up in agriculture. So there's the manpower out there, I believe, to do it. We just need to be able to Number one, like Paul said, make it cool for the people that want to do some of the stuff that he's doing, I think, and then make it achievable for the others that maybe don't have other plans or don't know what they should be doing and don't really understand about agriculture and what goes on. You know, I was just out in Iowa driving around for the last 2 days earlier this week. And you look at the agriculture and the farming, everything goes out there. And I know it's more monocultural type stuff, but there's a bunch of other things going on out there that it's really fun and really exciting to be part of. We just got to make people understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, when it comes to, we have a lot of farm workers and a lot of undocumented workers who are coming in, who for a long time were coming in seasonally to work the land. They have a huge wealth of knowledge that a lot of the American farming system has lost. And first, when, you know, African Americans were supposed to be given a lot of land to continue to work after slavery was abolished, but then of course that didn't happen, and the systematic sort of stealing of land from those same people by, you know, many different avenues, but the USDA in particular, we have this huge loss of knowledge that if we're not able to kind of find new and innovative ways to bring people in to work the land and own the land, not just work it, I think that we're going to continue seeing these problems in the decades to come. So I appreciate you touching on that, because I think it's really critical. I'd like to talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, we just real quick, we have
please.
A quote that goes on some of our packaging. It basically says, you know, you can't talk about regenerative wisdom without talking about indigenous wisdom. We're like fully understanding that we didn't come up with this stuff, right? This type of farming's happened in the Americas and beyond for a really long time. And so getting those different perspectives in to really like build out systems. And this isn't, I mean, we're talking about Pasturebird, but this is a huge movement that needs to happen across, you know, chicken, corn, kale, you know, cotton. Every single crop can be grown in a degenerative or regenerative way. And so there's just so much opportunity. I really think it's the golden age for regenerative right now. There's so many solutions, both tech and low tech, that need to come from all the different pockets of the world. And so this idea that we're just going to have all people that kind of look the same and talk the same, figure out solutions to these problems is laughable. Like, we really need a lot of diversity of thought and opinion to come into the system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And once all of the hard work is done of growing your crop or raising your animals regeneratively, although that's sort of silly, like the work is never done, but we'll say once that work is done, you know, it's really important to be able to communicate all of that hard work to your consumers, to your potential retailers. And Paul, I know that you have a really strong presence on LinkedIn and social media, but there's a lot of work that's also gone into your packaging. And you just mentioned another piece that's on your packaging, a sort of acknowledgement of Indigenous practice. So all that being said, you know, what are some of the ways that you communicate all this good work to the consumer? Sometimes it can be confusing. Sometimes it can be like scientifically complicated. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you do that.
I mean, I said in my post, we're going to talk about some of the things that we don't exactly have figured out yet. This is probably one of them, right? So it's like we go to all this effort to reinvent chicken coops, to reinvent the way that we raise chickens, to do things completely different. We have this really nutrient dense product, you know, it's 3 times higher in omega-3, 50% higher in vitamin A, vitamin E. I think it tastes really great. It's all this, but then consumers still don't even understand the difference between free range and pasture raised. And it's like, it's going to take a ton of consumer education to help people to understand what the benefits are and what the differences are. And I think packaging can only take you so far. The meat space kind of in the US has been, in my opinion, like kind of reduced to a few different attributes. And while those are important, they don't capture the whole story. So we can slap pasture raised on, or we can slap regenerative on the package, but I don't think it really captures everything that's going on. And so it's one of kind of the unsolved mysteries, I think. We have an awesome marketing team. We're working really close with Mike and also Jake at Sprouts to crack this nut, but I would say it's one of the hardest things when you raise food in a very different way. How do you get that story across to consumers in a concise way that they're going to understand and be willing to pay for? We, I'll just say maybe two things real quick. I think our packaging, yeah, it's designed by Pearl Fisher in New York. I think they did an excellent job helping people understand that there's more to the story. You actually open up a flap and it shows you real photos from the farm. And it's got a lot of really great concise copy about how the animals are moving and how that's better for the land. And then you flip the package over and it has a QR code that takes you to either a live stream from the farm at that moment or a virtual farm tour that's pre-recorded. So, you know, the packaging's working really hard, but you just can't expect the packaging to do all the heavy lifting for you. So we also have a really great, like you said, social media push that's all about transparency, authenticity. We do not show any kind of photos that are like marketing pictures. Like we only show real photos from our real farm. That's really important, that people really know what they're getting. We go live, you know, about once a week from inside of the coop, 24-hour, like let people see exactly how their food's being produced. That transparency piece is really, really important. Those are a few of the things I would say we don't know yet. Like it's really hard to do things really differently and have people understand. So we have a sister company, Nyman Ranch. Some of those people are on this call. I think they've done a really great job really bringing people out to the farm and showing people how their practices work and having them meet farmers and do some of these things. So we do some of that as well. We've had like 25,000 people come for farm tours in the last 5 years. That's really important to get people onto the farm, but like it's not really scalable. You know, we're not going to get all of Sprouts customers to come out and see the farm for themselves. So it's really one of the challenging parts of this is how does that work? How do you tell that story?
Yeah. And I just want to do a quick shout out to the people at Nyman. We had Chris on with Chipotle to our innovation series a few months ago, and it was a great conversation. So I'm glad to be able to continue it and see, you know, familiar faces in the audience. But Mike, I mean, you know, Sprouts is very well known for their ability to kind of communicate. They've been doing this kind of sustainability communication for a long time, and even before, you know, worked with Sprouts, when you're working with other retailers have been trying to think about how to communicate these kinds of things to consumers for a long time. So I'm really interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, and if anybody knows the answer, I would love to have it because I could retire at that point in time if I knew the answer to that one. It's interesting. You know, we use a lot of different methods. You know, as you look at us and retailers traditionally, and a lot of the retailers will understand this, or we'll use POS, point of sale material, signs around the product and things. You know, we use gate signs to talk about attributes in front of it about the product. We have gate signs on our organic, our grass-fed beef, those such things are sitting right in front of the product. You know, we use dividers in the case that puts some stuff out there. But reality on that kind of stuff is customer, you have about 3 seconds for that customer to really look at things like that. And most, unless they're really interested, aren't reading that. They're looking at what the product is. Okay, this is grass-fed. Okay, I'm going to buy this in here. This is organic. I'm going to buy this in here. So it's good, you know. So we look at that and try and say, okay, how do we get that customer to understand these types of things and stop and look at it? So we'll do, you know, make sure that this area stands out in our case. So hopefully as a customer walks through there, and luckily for us, the poultry section of our sales is about 40% of our fresh meat tonnage. That's not dollars, that's fresh meat tonnage going through our register in our store. So poultry, especially in chicken, is 35% of that. So it's a huge area that gets shopped really hard in our stores because what we do, and I think customers will notice something different as we put it out there, but we still have to be able to explain to people why it's different. And I think one of the things I love about what Paul is doing is, you know, we can sit there and talk about free range, and we sell free range organic chicken, and I think our organic chicken supplier is best in class without a doubt. I think he's probably the best in the country. But free range is really hard to make a customer understand. And say free range, they think, oh, they're walking around out in the field the whole time. And you try and show a picture and show, you know, there's the barn with doors they come out of, and, you know, and there's 20, 30 birds out in grazing there, and the rest are all back in the barn. Thing, or, you know, they don't go out when it's under 40 and they're not out when it's over 80, those nice things. So that one's a hard one to communicate. Where this one, you know, we're sitting here watching Paul's video behind him. Any customer that can click on that and see that, This is so easy to understand what's going on with this. It's not, these chickens are outdoors. They're inside a house, but they're outdoors. We get them to do that. So we use a lot of influencers in ours, different cooks and different things that we'll be using on this. We don't do a print ad. We don't send anything out in print. Everything we do is digital, internet based. So we'll be sending that. We'll be sending blasts. We'll work with our marketing department. We'll get somebody from our marketing out there to really understand what's going on, so we can hopefully tell this story and understand. We'll use QR codes. People can look at it and take them right to this and say, wow, I've never seen this before. So I think that's why this one gets me so excited. It's nothing's easy to communicate, but this is more easily communicatable than just about anything that I think we've ever done.
Yeah, so you touched a little bit on kind of moving into the digital space, and Paul, obviously your mobile coop, I believe, was designed in part by NASA. Is that right? Or NASA scientists? So I'd love to.
Yeah, we did have some help from the Jet Propulsion Labs folks at NASA. They didn't design it, but they jumped in and they helped out.
Very, very exciting. I mean, especially this week with all the James Webb photos that came out. I'm sure everyone's been seeing them all over the place. Yeah. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about what role you think technology plays in the regenerative movement, because I think so much of the regenerative discourse surrounds kind of getting back to nature, getting back to ecosystems, getting back to Indigenous practice. But obviously, like, you are working to bring in the technology side. And so I just want to hear from you kind of how you think that intersection is going to play out.
I mean, the movement has been accused of kind of a bunch of Luddites that are just afraid of embracing any kind of technology, and maybe that's rightfully so, and in certain times in certain areas. But I would say for me, the most exciting space within tech is biomimicry. And so what that is looking at nature as the model and then using the most modern technology possible to kind of replicate natural systems. Whether we understand all the benefits of that or not, sometimes we don't even know why things work so much better in nature than they do in our space. But I think it's sad to me when people look at tech as forcing nature into their box. It's way more exciting when we can look at, and this isn't just food and fiber, this is like everywhere. When we can look at tech as a way to replicate nature more closely. So, this idea to me is just like, it's just common sense that animals would move. And we've been doing it, in the US, it's happened for 40, 50 years, but it's all done by hand. It's really, really labor intensive, and it ends up costing a lot of money because everything has to get moved with a person or a tractor kind of pulling each coop of 100 or 600 birds at a time. But I think that we did a good job using responsible technology and biomimicry technology, where, like you see behind me, the birds actually have, protection from the elements. Chickens are jungle fowl, so they're not meant to be running around out in an open field. They really want to be under a bush or a tree or shade. They want to be close to their buddies, and they want to be close to their food and water source. And so by kind of doing all that, leveraging all the cool stuff that we saw in the kind of big chicken space with the feed pans and the water lines and the ventilation and all that. But then we took solar panels, we attached them to like 26 electric drive wheels, and that coop that you see behind me actually drives itself, no human intervention at all. Like, you push a button and it just drives 6,000 birds to fresh pasture over the course of like 5 to 7 minutes. I mean, that's a job that previously would have taken us all day with a couple people. Now it can be done in 5 to 7 minutes. It's automated, it's all solar powered, so it's really clean. We're not like driving a diesel tractor out there. And the most exciting thing to me is now this is at a scale that will integrate to feed our corn and soybean fields and our crop fields. So before, it was really hard to integrate with the big crop fields because it was such small scale production, where now, in Georgia, we're working with cotton farms and wheat farms, and we're actually going in rotation with the cotton in the different crops to regenerate and refertilize those fields, sort of rotate off and plant the corn and cotton behind. And I really feel like that integration of plant and animal is the future of food. I mean, I'm really excited about it. And again, that goes back to nature has no monoculture, right? Like there is no monocrop in nature. It's always biodiverse. It's always animals moving across a landscape. And there's all these benefits to that for animal welfare, for taste and nutrition, like for the soil. But yeah, I think tech has a huge role to play with regenerative food. I don't think that we should be anti-technology at all. It just needs to be like appropriate tech and, in my opinion, biomimicry tech.
Fantastic. There's a really great question in the chat from Adam. He does a great job of laying out a lot of the obstacles that are facing producers, particularly in the Midwest, and kind of wraps it all up by saying, okay, so how do we actually make some change here? And I think the way that I'd like to kind of direct the question to kind of make it a little simpler, if there was one regulatory or legislative change that would make each of your jobs easier, can you think of something that would do that on a large scale, kind of make it? I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be regulatory or legislative, but maybe like one large sweeping magic wand change that could make your job much easier.
Good luck, Mike.
That is a tough question. One that's very difficult to answer without getting in a lot of trouble. No,
I'll take a shot while you think about it if you want, because I kind of have this position. I get made fun of it a lot, but I have this position that, like, farmers, we've turned to the government to solve our problems far too often, and we're hoping that they do this or that, or give us this subsidy or that subsidy. And I really think deep down, like in the pure conscious capitalism, can help a lot. And so I think building these systems that do pay farmers more and give consumers a better value, yeah, it's going to cost, a little bit more, but if you're getting 3 times the omega-3s and it costs you, 20% more, if you're getting a better bang for your buck, I think that's an easy, it's an easy choice for the consumer. So I think relying on the government too much has been one of the kind of hallmarks with agriculture. And I think it's held us back more than it's helped us. And so building out systems that actually benefit all, I think that there's win-win-win kind of triple bottom line opportunities out there if we're creative and if we're really smart about it.
Yeah, and I think I've thought about it, and I think probably easy when looking at it from my side, which it really doesn't help producers or these guys, and it possibly could, would be just more transparency in pricing. I'd really like to be able to understand, some more mandatory price reporting, some other things so we know truly understand input costs for producers, where they're at with that cost, and what our true cost of goods should be to us. I think everybody needs to make a profit. I have no issue with that, but I do think, through COVID, I think some of the producer segments have taken advantage of some of the positions they've been put in and looking at things. And I think it would be really beneficial for the government to work on making sure we have the most transparent pricing system in the world.
And do you think, as somebody who's working for a retailer and is potentially in charge of, sourcing from new producers, would sort of radical transparency on their part potentially give them a leg up if they were coming to you with kind of open books and said, here's what we've got going on? Are you more likely to go with them than someone who's less forthcoming?
The short answer, yes.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, so I just want to give kind of a last call for anybody who wants to put questions into the chat, because I want to make sure that we're able to get to everybody. There was a good one in here that I don't want you to miss, Paul, that said, when's the Pasturebird Netflix special coming out? So I guess there's a real demand for it, so you better get on it. Actually, a wonderful question.
So I'll give you a quick funny story. Early on, there were 9 of us living in a 1,700 square foot house when we were very first just trying to get this farm off the ground. And we actually had HBO and Animal Planet come out, and they asked if they can do like a special, like kind of a Duck Dynasty or whatever kind of special. And I wanted to do it because any press is good press, and you're just grinding and you're trying to get your start and all that. And it was actually very wise. My mother-in-law said, I don't know if we need any more drama than like 9 people all living under one roof with, a fledgling little business with no money. And so we ended up not doing it. And I think it was like the smartest thing that's ever happened, because all the family still gets along. We all talk to each other. Like we're all, the family's doing really well through all that. And it may not have been the case if we had cameras in our face 24/7.
Yeah, it's like, do we want to see this farm make it to year 1? Then we better listen to the mother-in-law. This great question just came in from Haley, so thanks for putting that in. Directed at Paul, but I would love to hear from Mike too if you have any input. What are some ways that you can better support getting veterans and women into regen ag, whether that's like organizations that you can recommend, or just general advice? I think that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, there's no vote that's stronger than your dollar. I mean, we each get a chance to vote 3 times a day with every meal that we buy. And so I think seeking out the farms that are doing things that you kind of believe in is so powerful. There's actually no legislation, I think, that's more powerful than what products you literally buy and what you support. That being said, I'm a huge proponent of the Farmer Veteran Coalition. They helped us get our start. I think that they do a really great job, kind of like grants and some help and some mentorship early on. And then once you're into the program, you become a mentor for up and coming farmers. So I think that's one really great organization that we're part of.
Awesome.
And I think Paul's much better equipped to answer that one than I am, since I'm not so as close to the farming side of it. I think there's other agricultural things in the industry, though, that I think the industry could probably do better throughout, the beef, pork, chicken industry, to try and recruit and get veterans in. I know that everybody's hurting for help, especially good quality or smart help. And I think that I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think there's an opportunity there for all of us.
Great, thank you. I'm going to direct this one to you, Mike. Do you have any great examples that this is also from the chat? So thanks, Richard, for your question. Do you have any great examples of marketing that explains the price value proposition of foods created on farm with smart regenerative practices? And obviously big time Pasturebird, but I know that Sprouts carries so many other, great regenerative brands that deserve shout outs. So
honestly, this one's tough because it's new as we look at it. So just talking pure regenerative, because we don't really, at least on the meat side in our stores, market anything as regenerative. I believe, in our HPA side, some of the vitamins and things like that they do, but I don't know enough to really speak about that. So to want to really speak of one that's regenerative, I'd say call me back in a year, 2 years, and let's see how this story goes. I think it's going to be very successful.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
We do, real quick, we work with a company called Land to Market. They're part of the Savory Institute, and they actually quantify regenerative outcomes. So I've been really down on a lot of the certifications out there in favor of just telling our own personal story and being radically transparent. But I do think EOV is that's their ecological outcome verification. And it's actually a seal that goes on to package. And I think that what they're doing is really interesting. So shout out to EOV. I don't think consumers really have their heads wrapped around regenerative yet, but what they're doing is a scientific approach to saying, let's look at the soil every single year. Did you literally have a regenerative impact or not? And that feeds into their certification. So I think that that's really interesting and really different than what other folks are doing, which is just sort of an annual, pop quiz, checking the box. So I think that what they're doing is cool. I just think, like Mike said, we're going to have to give this one a couple of years and see where we net out, because it's going to be real interesting to see what hits and what doesn't,
Sure. And I know that we here at How Good talk a lot about outcomes-based versus practice-based verification. And so we're big fans of Land to Market as well. So shout out to them. So now that we're kind of wrapping up at the top of the hour, I'd like to ask each of you. I've noticed on our call today, we have quite a few people who are in graduate school, in an MBA program, maybe in college. If you had one piece of advice to give to somebody who is starting out in your field, in your line of work, what might it be?
for me, it would be find the company that you believe in and fits your values. It took me a long time to do that. I worked for a lot of years for a paycheck, and I really liked a lot of companies. And there's some companies I worked for I really did like and valued, and maybe there's some changes or something that happened, or an acquisition that I moved away from that company. But I would say find something you believe in and that is important to you, and really try and get in there and drive what you believe. Don't be shy about it. That's one of the great things about Sprouts. They enjoy, one of our values is we love being different and care. So being different is bringing up different things and trying different things and trying to grow things like this. So find something that you really enjoy and believe in, give that a shot. Don't do it just for the money.
Love that.
Yeah, I'd say mine is like the idea of focus. So we've teetered on heavy distraction. We really wanted to be cattle farmers in the beginning. We've raised pigs and sheep, and we've done trees, and we've done online sales and retail sales and all these different things. And I think where we really felt like we started to make an impact was actually getting focused on a mission. Our mission is, making pasture raised meat more accessible and more affordable. And that's our driving kind of guiding light. That's our North Star. That shouldn't be everybody's mission at all, but I think having a really clear, crystal clear mission that the team can organize around has helped us to really grow. And so I see so many young people coming into this, and they want to do every type of livestock. They want to sell, online. They want to sell farmers markets. They want to sell retail. They want to sell restaurants. And it's like, I couldn't tell you the number of awesome entrepreneurs that have just gone by the wayside from lack of focus. And so I think having some focus and a clear idea of what you want to do is really helpful in the production space.
Wonderful. And then, so I think we have time for one more. And so I want to take it to the people who are on the call who are maybe already working in the food system, maybe in a more traditional side of things, and are looking to make a change from within their organization. Any thoughts on what's something that they might be able to do within their current role?
The biggest thing I'd say is don't be afraid to speak up and ask questions and try something. Don't be afraid to fail. If you believe in something and you think it's the right thing to do, take it to somebody. Like, try it. If it doesn't work, so what? Try something else. You're never going to be right 100% of the time. I'd say the biggest thing, learn to communicate up. Make sure that the people you're talking to understand what you're saying, what you're trying to achieve, and what you want to do. Don't tell people that are your peers or down below you. Tell the people that can make the difference.
Excellent. Well, that's about our time. Please feel free. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much to both our speakers for joining us today. I know that you're both busy, and I know, Paul, you're in fact out of the country, so I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything that we should look out for from both of you in the coming weeks or months that I can tell everybody to keep their eye out for?
Yeah, we're looking to roll.
Well, you definitely got to go buy some pasture-raised chicken at Sprouts. Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at starting the rollout with it in our Georgia stores, because they have the Georgia farm and Georgia processing right there, and that hopefully will be sometime mid to late August. So it's coming up very quickly.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to that. I have linked all three of our LinkedIns in the chat, so if anybody in the audience would like to connect with any of us there, please feel free to do so, and keep an eye out for our next innovation series, which will be starting in the fall. Thanks again very much, everyone, and we'll talk soon.